Thundercats number 3 from Dynamite Comics brings a familiar character into the fold, escalating the rift between Panthro and Lion-O that can only be settled in single combat. We're going to talk about it right here. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Thundercats number 3 from Dynamite Comics. In this review, we're going to talk about what happened last issue, what happened in this issue, what do we like, what we didn't like, and the final score. Before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about the credits. This issue is written by Declan Shalvey with art by Drew Moss, colors by Martina Pignedoli, letters by Jeff Eckelberry, and the main cover A, is drawn by David Nakayama. Before we dig into this issue, let's recap what happened last time. So the Thundercats were exploring the terrain of Third Earth after the fight with Slythe and the mutant army that he brought with him. And they went through the wreckage of Slythe's ship and they discovered that there's a Thundercat on board, a new character invented specifically for this series by the name of Calica. Lion-O is all in because he's got his hormones on, as it were, and he's like, well, she's a Thunderian, she's one of us, we're going to trust her and bring her in, and that's all there is to it. Panthro's like, hey, Lion-O, maybe not so fast. Let the years of experience and wisdom tell you that sometimes you got to look into things before you just accept who she is. Now you can see that the tension was growing between them, but Calica seems to be just playing along, but you do get the suggestion, or at least the very hint at the end of the issue, that Calica may not be either who she says she is, or at the very least she might be under some kind of outside influence. Now we pick up with Thundercats number 3. So it's late at night. Calica's wandering around the base, much to Panthro's annoyance. And he's like, well, what are you doing here wandering in and out of these rooms when you shouldn't be out and about and when we don't know who you are for sure? And she says, well, I'm just feeling a little antsy. I'm feeling a little agitated because I was trapped on that ship with Slythe and the mutants for so long. So I'm still a little bit kind of shell-shocked, if you will. He says, I understand that, but I also understand that just being upfront with you, I don't trust you. So go back to your room, stay out of these sensitive areas, and we'll talk later. When she heads back to her room, she runs into Lion-O, and she says, well, I think I need some fresh air. Lion-O says, well, I'll go with you, but let me check the perimeter and make sure everything's okay. He whips out the Sword of Omens, does his mantra, and what happens, much to his surprise, is that the Sword of Omens opens up a doorway portal into what looks like some kind of pocket dimension that is Thunderian in design and nature. And then all of a sudden, something jumps out at him. We cut to Mumra, who is in his castle keep, and he is talking to, or trying to talk to, the spirit of Jaga. Now, Jaga has been remaining very silent this entire time, but it's very clear that Mumra knows who Jaga is, and through the dialogue, we see, or at least we learn, that Mumra knows Jaga from years ago. How they know each other and what was the nature of the relationship and how that all came to pass, we have no idea, but that's what happens. When we cut back to the Thundercats base, Cheetara hears a scream and she starts running around looking for what happened, and then they find out that the thing that jumped out of that doorway from a pocket dimension turns out to be Snarf. It is Snarf. Snarf has now entered the story, and this Snarf is not chatty Snarf. The Snarf is more like a pet or an animal, but he has, according to Panthro, a telepathic bond with Lion-O, so the two of them can communicate, but nobody else can hear it or see it. Effectively, Snarf looks more like a traditional, or acts like more like a traditional cat. When they go into the pocket dimension where Snarf jumped out, they find that it's full of all kinds of weapons and Thunderian artifacts, and it looks like it was something that was set up back on Thundar, and Snarf was sent in there to protect the space until Lion-O and the Thundercats were ready after they found their new home. Cut to outside of Third Earth, and we see that Slythe is trussed up near a fire like a Christmas goose. Apparently he's been captured and tied up, although we never exactly see who his captors were. Slythe manages to escape and run away, but he falls down a ravine and gets knocked out. We cut back to the Thundercats base. The Lion-O and Panthro and Snarf and some of the other Thundercats come out of the pocket dimension with Calica waiting, and Lion-O says, why are you waiting out here? Why didn't you come out with the rest of us? You're Thundercats like everybody else. Panthro says, nope, I told her to wait out here because I still don't trust her and we don't know what she's all about. And then all of a sudden that escalates into a fist fight between Lion-O and Panthro. And Cheetara suddenly runs in and intervenes and knocks Panthro against the wall. And she says, wait a minute, he's the king. You're not allowed to put your hands on him. And the lion, no, you're the king. You're not allowed to put your hands on the general. So then I could challenge Panthro to single combat. So now the fight is on between Panthro and Cheetara. And the two of them go at it. And after a course of time, yep, it's Cheetara who eventually wins because she manages to figure out how to knock the armor off that's weighing her down, and she uses that to her advantage. Then we cut to sometime after the fact where Lion and Panthro sort of make up, and they realize that they still have a respect for each other and they still care about each other. And even though they settled their differences with a fight, even though it wasn't necessarily between the two of them, they recognize that they have to work together to survive. And then we cut to a little bit later. After Sly wakes up, he's now tied to a big boulder, and he's like, how dare you? Nobody's allowed to tie me up. You're going to pay for that. And we find out that the person who tied him up was Monkeyan, another one of the mutants, but the ones that look like monkeys or baboons. And that's how we end the issue. What do we like about this issue? A lot happens. You're getting more information about the strangely new relationship between Jaga and Mum-Ra. Snarf's reappearance, and a reappearance with a twist on the character, is a welcome addition because, I know not everybody loves Snarf, but I mean, if you want the complete Thundercats picture, seeing Snarf is a good deal. The pocket dimension that has a bunch of Thunderian artifacts, including weapons, is intriguing. We want to know want to know more about that and how that could lead to some cool stuff that develops in the future. Also, the fight between Panthro and Cheetara is a pretty cool action sequence. You definitely find out that Panthro is, considered one of the best fighters in the Thundercats, but Cheetara is nothing to sneeze at, and she definitely proves it here. So in a lot of ways, you get new characters or I should say old characters that are introduced newly, so that makes the story more complete. You get an elevation of Panthro and Cheetara through their fight and the sequence of events that led to the fight, and you get more information about the mystery involving the relationship between Jaga and Panthro. What didn't we like about this issue? Everything related to Slythe seems very tacked on. That's not necessarily wrong in this grand sense of, if Slythe is one of your favorite villain characters, it's a good thing to have him in the comic, but it just feels like it's happening on its own and not really connected to the story in any way. Plus his escape from when he was captured the first time and then escaped, there was a little bit of slapstick humor to it that felt tonally off from the comic. So, I mean, overall, it's not terrible, but it just feels a little out of place and tonally inconsistent. Let's switch gears to talk about the art a little bit from Drew Moss. It's okay. You get some twists on the characters, like Tiger with his mustache. Snarf looks a little bit different because he's supposed to be more animalistic in nature. Generally speaking, you get the characters and they look like the characters you expect. On the flip side of that, Drew Moss's art style is a little, I would term it as blocky. The characters feel very thick and sort of and not at all contoured or shaped in any way that feels athletic or dynamic. There's a sort of blockiness to Drew Moss's art. It's not terrible by any stretch, but at the same time, we've seen better, and I don't mean that to be insulting, but that's just the truth. We've seen better. Final thoughts: what we think about Thundercats #3 from Dynamite Comics. Lots of great action, lots of great story development. Bringing Snarf into the fold feels like a positive development because now the picture feels a little bit more complete, and there are some intriguing developments that kind of enhance the mystery of what's going on between Jaga and Mum-Ra. On the downside, Sly's subplot, it feels a little tacked on, doesn't really seem to be meaningful or connected or cohesive in any way, and the art is not terrible, but it's not fantastic either. It's just okay. Therefore, we're going to give Thundercats #3 from Dynamite Comics a 7.8 out of 10. It's a good mix of story and art that together form a pretty I would say better than serviceable comic. But there are some things that, you could elevate this story a little bit to make it a little bit more attention grabbing and give you a little bit more pop and wow factor, which is sort of missing at this point. What do you think of the Thundercats? Do you think this is a good adaptation so far? Are you a Thundercats fan, or are you using this as the first entry into your knowledge of the Thundercats? Let us know in the comment section. Otherwise, please stay tuned through the outro for the next review.